It's a real pleasure to all of you assembled here today to discuss some really interesting issues regarding Ukrainian energy security and how that affects the rest of Europe and, of course, the rest of NATO and the globe. My name is Robert Baines. I'm the President and CEO of the NATO Association of Canada, an NGO dedicated to informing Canadians about the value of security and the importance of NATO. We've been putting on Zoom webinars for the entire extent of COVID, and we continue to do so. Beyond that, we are always interested in publishing ideas, discussing issues, and making sure that we can chart a way forward, not only just Canada, but the rest of NATO and the rules-based international order. It's a very important thing to all of us to keep these issues at the forefront of our minds and to remember how connected we are with the rest of the world. Today, I'm honored to be able to help introduce Dr. Robert Cutler, our Director of the NATO Association Energy Security Program. He is also our Senior Fellow. Dr. Cutler has a long distinguished career in energy security. His education bridges both MIT and the University of Michigan. He's a fellow at the Global Affairs Institute here in Canada, and he's been discussing these issues surrounding energy security for decades. And it's an absolute pleasure to be able to continue to work with him. And he's going to tell you a little bit more about some of our expanding goals with the energy security program at the NATO Association. Robert, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Robert Baines. I should mention to the audience that you may be receiving an email requesting your opt-in or giving you the opportunity to opt-in specifically for notifications about future energy security program webinars. They take place about once a month. We've had them in the fall on what energy security means to NATO, on Nord Stream 2, on the Eastern Balkans, Romania, Bulgaria, and European energy security. And today, not by plan, because this has been under preparation for some time, but right again, in the middle of the headlines, here we are with a webinar with an all-star panel on Ukraine's centrality to European energy security. Probably most of you know about this already, but I'll make a few introductory remarks, only a few, and then introduce briefly the panel and we'll get underway. The webinar addresses the central place of Ukraine in energy's security for Europe and the broader transatlantic political and geoeconomic security implications, because gas transit through Ukraine is a matter not just of energy security, but also of national security for Ukraine and other countries in the wider region. The country's pipeline network, and we have the president, the general director of the pipeline network company with us, I'll mention that, who will be the first speaker, Mr. Sergei Makogan, whom I thank for his initiative to motivate this webinar. That the country's pipeline network has a capacity roughly equal to Russia's westward exports, yet Gazprom has spent billions of dollars constructing Nord Stream 1 and the Turk Stream pipelines that circumvent Ukraine and Eastern Europe more broadly. The current contract between the gas transmission system operator of Ukraine and Gazprom foresees small volumes of transit equivalent to about 1/3 of Ukraine's capacity to the end of 2024, and if Nord Stream 2 becomes operational, not even that is certain. I'll introduce, because we have 4 members of the panel, we have a slightly different format. Usually with 3 members of the panel, we have 3 consecutive presentations and then a question and answer. Today, I will introduce Sergei Makogan, who is the Director General of the Gas Transit System Organization of Ukraine, at the helm of which he has overseen the establishment of Ukraine's independent transit operator following the successful unbundling from gas trading and production in 2019. He was previously responsible for gas transmission strategy of Ukraine at Ukrtransgaz and Naftogaz. Prior to that, he had senior positions in Microsoft, Deloitte, and Ericsson. He will speak for up to 10 minutes. Then we're very fortunate to have Agata Wolskot-Strakota, who was educated principally at the University of Warsaw and holds an advanced degree in international economics. She has been an energy policy analyst since 2001 and is a senior research fellow at OSW, the Center for Eastern Studies in Warsaw. She has wide and deep expertise in the subject of international energy relations with respect to Russia, the Caspian Sea countries, the East European transit countries, and Central and Southern Europe. At present, she focuses on challenges to the EU's security of energy supply, external dimension of EU energy policy, and EU-Russia energy relations, and developments in the European gas market. She then, following Mr. Makogan, will speak for 10 minutes, up to 10 minutes. Then the two of them will have the chance to discuss together. Either Sergei will have questions to put to Agata, or Agata will have questions to put to Sergei, and they will speak together because this is an opportunity for them to do so for as long as they wish, as long as they have things to say to each other that are of interest to one another. Following the conclusion of their dialogue, I will introduce in slightly greater detail Dr. Maria Shagina, who will speak for up to 8 minutes, not as a presenter, but as a respondent to what has gone before, specifically on the topic of her expertise, which is sanctions. And I will introduce Andreas Umland, who will speak on the domestic German dynamic and how that factors into the EU dynamic and the international dynamic that we will talk about before. Then I will explain then afterward what happens then, because I've gone on for long enough now. And so I simply, with no further ado, as they say, hand the baton over to Mr. Makogan. I thank you for your for the excellent preparation. I've been in touch with members of your team. It's a pleasure to welcome you personally, finally here. And we are all very interested in what you have to say on the topic at hand. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Robert. Good evening, or I don't know, maybe morning somewhere. Thank you very much for this great opportunity to present our vision on the situation that we have about Nord Stream and general energy security of Europe. I will start sharing my presentation. Okay. Can you see it? Okay. Next slide. Okay. So, so I will start. I would like to present you this picture, which shows greatly what is happening right now with the pipelines around Europe and around Ukraine. So it's clear that Nord Stream 2 is actually the elephant in the room, especially at the present moment when its ultimate fate might be decided at the very time we are speaking. I'm certain that we will cover this question thoroughly during today's webinar, because we have great panel today with the professionals with the great knowledge in the sanctions, European energy system, and geopolitics. With this in mind, I would like to spend a couple of minutes just to paint a broader picture. So international transit is definitely the existential question for our company, because our income is more than 70% depend on transit. But this is something more to our company than that. Let me share with you some thoughts on the role we currently play in the defending European energy security and vision for the future. So I will start from our understanding what Europe needs, our vision. First of all, it's stability, versatility, and ample capacity to meet demand. It's clear that Ukrainian system fits all those requirements better than any alternative. What are the risks to supply competition and the border security, broader security of gas supplies in Europe? First one, is the risk of subsea infrastructure. It's obvious that it's more complicated to maintain the subsea pipeline than the on-land pipelines. Ukraine route with multiple on-land redundancies is much more robust and flexible. This is first one. The second one is the risk of relying on one supplier, especially when this supplier also controls the export pipelines. So I'm talking about Gazprom. We see that with Turk Stream, actually, several countries, I believe, were forced to use the Turk Stream instead of the Ukrainian route. And also we know that in Russia there are more than 200 independent gas producers, which in total produce about 25% of all Russian production. But they still don't have the access to exit pipelines. There is a state monopoly provided only to Gazprom for the export pipelines of Russian Federation. So that's why we're kind of stuck from the eastern side of our border, because there is nobody to offer our services, because there is only one potential client for us because of the state monopoly. Also, also the European Union, we believe, needs a robust transit system with some spare capacity to cover the demand. The Yamal, Turk Stream, Nord Stream 1 are fully loaded. Ukraine network is only one remaining pipeline which can guarantee flexible supplies in case of the peak demands. But very important point that our network should not be taken for granted. We'll have to optimize our system to reflect the real demand. Otherwise, how we can justify the real cost to our shareholders, the people of Ukraine? So, as you correctly said, our capacity, existing capacity of transit gas from Russia to Ukraine is about 146 billion cubic meters. But for this year, contract with Gazprom covers only 40. So it means that there is 100 BCM of spare capacity in Ukraine. The last risk we see is climate consideration. So the future of gas in Europe is highly uncertain beyond 2030, but these new pipelines, they go, far beyond 2030, and we believe that in the future it will be necessary to actually winding down the existing infrastructure or switching to alternative gas, not the building the new infrastructure. So. With Turk Stream already operational, the numbers speaks for themselves. If anyone still has doubts about Nord Stream 2, the arithmetic makes it very clear that neither Germany nor Europe need it. As you see, the current capacity of Ukrainian system can easily cover remaining required volumes under stable demand scenario. We took actually for this exercise, we took the very optimistic export projection of Gazprom. We believe it could be with the Green Deal concept and the COVID consequences. We think that the actually export from Russia will be lower. But anyway, even for this very optimistic scenario, we see that we have enough capacity to cover all the needs. So, but if the Nord Stream 2 will be completed, so it definitely will create irreparable problems for the Eastern Europe and for Ukraine, for Eastern and for the Central Europe. On this slide, I would like to show our progress in Ukraine about the market organization. So, because we believe that supply competition is made up out of two components: software and hardware. I just talk about hardware, so we have quite strong gas transmission system. We have the biggest storages in Europe, 31 billion cubic meters. This is the biggest volume of storages at the continent. But a decade ago, when the discussion about Nord Stream 2 just started, Europe was rightly skeptical about Ukraine's software. It means about our energy law and energy regulation about the gas market. But during the last couple of years, we did significant reform. And I would like to say that now we have implemented all necessary European energy regulation, and first of all, unbundling. And according to the recent assessment of energy community, you see that we are far ahead of our, let's say, other members of the energy community, and we are almost very close to our neighbors such as Hungary, Slovakia, Poland. So we did our homework. Also, what I would like to say that the problem is that news about the gas market revolution travels quite slow, and we are also derailed by misinformation campaign that continue to smear our transit system. So we believe that based on what I just said on our great gas infrastructure, the storages, we can think about positioning Ukraine as a new strong player for the European gas market, because previously our role was considered just east to west transit of gas, but now it is not like that. I would like to say that just last year in 2020, the European traders brought to Ukraine about 10 billion cubic meters of gas for seasonal storage. So we already proved that we have the trust from European traders. We already proved that they understand our rules, how to operate with us, how to make these deliveries, storages. So we have implemented all necessary IT tools, implemented necessary regulations and other things. So I would like to say that probably the shippers, they do the same in Ukraine, what they do in other European markets. Also, I believe that with the current development, like the development of LNG terminals in Poland, the pipeline to Norwegian gas in Poland, with our powerful Trans-Balkan pipeline, which now stays empty because Gazprom switched the gas deliveries from Trans-Balkan pipeline to undersea Turk Stream pipeline. But this pipeline is very powerful. It can easily deliver up to 20 billion of cubic meters of gas from the South Europe to Ukraine, and further through Ukraine to Central and Northern Europe. So also we believe that the creation of LNG terminals around 3 seas, I mean Adriatic, Baltics, and Black Sea, it's also create this unique opportunity to develop, let's say, regional Eastern European gas hub, which will provide necessary trading mechanism, which will provide the infrastructure for diverting gas flows between the countries, storing gas and selling gas. So we believe that we can play a very important role and be the key part of this new Eastern European gas market, and be very important part of the general European energy strategy. So just 3 concrete steps we believe that could which we can do, I mean, not we, but in general could be done to increase supply competition. Not the competition of the routes, which bring the same gas to the same consumers, but through the different routes. We are talking right now about the real supply competition. And first one, as I already said, that open up transit opportunities for the independent gas producer in Russia. They produce 25% of the total production in Russia. So it's Rosneft, Surgutneftegas, Lukoil, and many, many others. The second one is bring Central Asian gas back to Europe. I would like to remind you that in the early late 90s, even Ukraine was able to buy the gas from Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and deliver it through Russia to Ukraine. Now this pipeline still exists, and if Russia will sign the energy charter and ensure the transit of Central Asian gas to Ukraine, we easily can deliver it further to Europe. And the last point is to give international traders the option to make the title transfer of Russian gas, not in Europe or at the western border of Ukraine, but at the eastern border of Ukraine. It means then that in such case, the traders will be able to deliver gas as they wish. I mean, for example, they will take gas on our eastern border, deliver part of this gas, I don't know, to Slovakia, another part they can put in the storage, and third part they can sell in the internal Ukrainian market. So we believe this, all this discussion about this supply competition, it's not about building new pipeline. It's about the creating software at the eastern border, which will allow new players to come to Europe with their gas. So this is it from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sergey. Agata, the floor is now yours to tell us how all this looks from Warsaw as regards energy security of Poland, of East Central Europe in particular, and the EU as a whole. Please, go ahead.
Robert, thank you a lot for invitation and possibility to be here and speak with you on this important topic. Thank you to NATO Association of Canada. And indeed, as we heard, Ukraine plays crucial role in EU, especially in Central and Eastern European energy landscape. And the future of Ukrainian gas infrastructure depends on future of Russian transit. As we heard, if transit stops or is very small, then it will be both physically and financially not possible to keep it all going. But it also depends on future of gas demand in Europe. And according to European estimates, in the next 10 years, maybe 15, demand in Europe is going to remain rather stable. And with decreasing internal production, it should mean increased need for imports. And so probably for transit via Ukraine. In longer period, if current energy and climate policy is implemented as planned, gas demand in Europe is expected to fall. And if we look at Europe closer, there are countries such as Central and Eastern European countries and Southeast European countries where gas will play an important role as transition, if you will, and the demand there will be growing in next 10, 15 years. And so there will be need for pipelines and for gas transit, for gas imports. In at least 10, 15 years time, probably more. And for cooperation with Ukraine. Role of Ukrainian infrastructure in Central and Eastern Europe has started recently to change, specifically due to decreasing gas transit from Russia via Ukraine due to Turk Stream launch. But it remains important. It is still key piece of infrastructure in regional network. It remains important transit corridors to Central and Eastern Europe. And despite all the political and economic challenges facing Ukraine since 2013, it has remained stable and secure transit corridor. We witness new infrastructure being built in the region, but Ukrainian infrastructure remains an important element of diversified, more and more structure of connections, and more interconnected gas network enables not only gas flowing from east to west, as was traditional way of gas flow in this region, but as Mr. Makagan said, also from west to east and on north-south gas axis. And this is kind of strategic project which is being realized in the region from Baltic Sea to Adriatic Sea and the Black Sea. And development of this network, but also Ukrainian infrastructure contributes to security of gas supply and market developments. But more importantly, Ukrainians' big spare capacity and storage facilities, as we heard, more and more used, translate into growing Ukrainian role as flexibility provided to whole Europe, but especially that is important for Central and East Europe and for balancing of Central European gas market. As we live in more and more liberalized environment of gas markets, which mean also more volatile market, where prices and gas availability may quickly change, and it matters specifically in peak demand times. And we just witnessed that this winter, when due to very low temperatures all over the world, LNG flew to Asia from Europe. And then demand for Russian gas and for spare capacity suddenly grows. And here Ukrainian infrastructure matters specifically. It can be important also in systems of more and more based on intermittent energy sources, where gas plays increasingly role of a backup. And this is the case of Central and Eastern Europe also, where gas is going to play increasingly important role as transition fuel. So Ukrainian gas market is increasingly an integral part of Central and East European gas market. We heard that in Mr. Makagan's presentation, but it's happening now due to infrastructure, due to spare capacities, but also adoption by Ukraine EU rules of the EU rules in the gas market, transparent, non-discriminatory rules enabling all third parties to access infrastructure, both in Ukraine and in Central Europe. These are the same rules, which enables increased cooperation between different actors and different market participants. It's Ukraine, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania. And this is accompanied by different gas trade instruments introduced, and it translates into intensification of gas trade in the region and increasing integration of Ukraine's and Central East European gas markets. But that all is about more than just pipelines. Big functioning piece of infrastructure is physical connection between Ukraine and Central Europe, Ukraine, Europe and European Union, Ukraine and Russia. And such a connection is a lasting, solid link that sustains and sometimes forces cooperation between different actors and countries. The idea of using energy and energy infrastructure as a confidence-building measure is known in Europe for long, was behind EU's initiative of launched many years ago energy community in Western Balkans when they were just after the war. Since then, energy community has grown and changed, and Ukraine became its integral and important part. increased connectiveness. As Mr. McCogan said, both hardware and software, so both physical and on the level of common rules between EU and Ukraine, but also Central and Eastern Europe and Ukraine, has brought these two closer on a not only energy, but also political level, enabled better communication. Ukraine's gas market reforms, as we heard, most advanced among energy community states, EU neighboring countries, are a success story for Ukraine, but also for the EU. They are a proof of effectiveness of EU's external energy policy and a ground for future fruitful cooperation, for example, in energy transition. Yet we witness also a reverse process to increasing connectiveness. Russia's stated goal of stopping transit via Ukraine, it is already decreasing transit. We saw like quite significant year-to-year decrease by 40% from 2019 to 2020. This is a process of disconnection. So it de facto leads to destruction of existing and functioning Ukraine-Russia gas connection, destroying big existing bridge which links Russia and Ukraine, but also with Central and Eastern Europe and EU. And it will have not only gas market or security of supply effects, but also political and strategic implication. Ukraine and Russia would have less in common. And one of the links between the European Union and Russia would be destroyed if this transit stops flowing and if pipes become redundant. And allowing Ukraine's infrastructure to become redundant, despite big efforts of aligning rules, etc., runs also contrary to EU's own interess and could undermine EU's external energy policy effectiveness. Thank you.
Thank you, Agata. I take the opportunity to mention to the audience, those of you watching on YouTube, for the question and answer period that will come, you may put your questions into the chat box on YouTube at any time, and they will be taken up when we get there. Now, Agata and Sergey, if you have both very interesting and deep presentations, perhaps I should start by asking Sergey whether he has any response to Agata or any questions to put.
Actually, thank you very much for your warm words. I am fully kind of support what you said, and very appreciate that you have such position regarding the Ukraine and our role in the pan-European energy security. What I would like to add that I believe that LNG should become very important part of the European gas market, because it provides also the kind of diversification and also security of supply. But usage of LNG will require significant volumes of storages, yes, in order to have this gas which deliver it, for example, during summer, but this gas should be kept during the till the winter, for example. And I believe that our storage could become such a buffer for this LNG gas, which could be later used for needs of trader. And together with Poland, I think we have unique opportunity to create this LNG and storage kind of business proposal and security proposal. So 2 terminals in Poland, Świnoujście and Gdańsk, which is planned to be built together with Ukrainian storages. So we can have a very interesting cooperation module, and also it would allow not to build new storages, for example, because it's very, very expensive exercise. We have like huge storages in Ukraine, which could be used for very reasonable tariff. Our tariff is 4 times cheaper than in neighboring countries. So this is the, I believe, very important opportunity for both countries, and we need to develop it further. So the second one, very important, I actually forgot to mention that I believe that the pipeline, and actually not the pipeline, but transit through Ukraine, it's kind of protection for Ukraine. Because when, I mean, from the military aggression, full size. So when Ukraine still transit about 30% of the total Russian export, we're still very important part of this puzzle. If the transit will be fully diverted from Ukraine, we will not have such attention, frankly speaking, from our European partners. And I believe that the aggression from Russian Federation, this hybrid aggression, could become not a hybrid aggression. This is true. This is very difficult time we live, and this is the reality. And also, I believe that I read from press there is some ideas to implement some brake mechanism in case of something happens. If Gazprom will stop the transit through Ukraine, then automatically the transit through Nord Stream 2 will be stopped. This is, you know, it would never happen. I hardly believe that Germany or European Union will decide to create the energy crisis in Europe by stopping Nord Stream 2 after Gazprom will stop Ukrainian transit. No, this is unbelievable. So it will be just a new Budapest memorandum for Ukraine, but we are not as kind of 2 times we will not accept such a proposal. So I believe that everybody should understand that if Nord Stream 2 will be built, the way how to start it will be found. So it's not very difficult to create the accident in Ukraine, for example, just to justify the start of the Nord Stream 2. We remember the case, I think it was in 2009, when the compressor station in Kazakhstan was fully destroyed because of some incident, and after that, the Turkmenistan stopped to supply gas to Russian Federation, which Russia has a contract, take-or-pay contract for 15 billion cubic meters for, I think, for 15 years. So this is very important topic, and now actually the very important time not to allow Nord Stream 2 to be completed and certified. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, the Budapest Memorandum, for those who don't know, to which Mr. Mahgan referred, was in the 1990s when Ukraine and the other Soviet republics, other than Russia, which had Soviet intercontinental ballistic missiles. The Budapest Memorandum provided for the renunciation and the turning over and the destruction of these missiles. And as part of the Budapest Memorandum, Russia signed on as a guarantor of Ukraine's sovereignty. And we can see how well that was respected. That's for those who don't recall. And so that also there are those who say that when the Nord Stream 1 entered into service in 2011, that this was, from a strategic Russian standpoint, a precondition that in fact enabled the increasing military pressure upon Ukraine that eventuated in the occupation of Ukrainian territory in 2014. So that if Nord Stream 2 would enter into service, then further restraints such as they exist upon Russian use of force would be falling away as well. But that's just a gloss to explain to those who don't recall what Sergei was saying. Agata, perhaps you have a response specifically to the Central European aspects of what he said.
Well, yes, thank you for these comments. Indeed, transit via Ukraine has like impact on military, security, economic situation of Ukraine, but I understand that also on gas supply security and situation. I understand that if gas stops flowing via Ukraine to Central Europe, there will be much less possibility of supplying gas from Europe to Ukraine as it is right now in a short, reverse flow mode, etc., etc. So that is also to be taken into account. I wanted to ask you about these rumors about Nord Stream, German, US deal, but I understand that you don't believe that there is any viable option for a deal which envisages both Nord Stream 2 completed and Ukraine transit going on, continuing. Did I get it right? So that is the question. And then going back to your first comment on LNG, indeed, this is an area of cooperation between Poland and Ukraine. I understand that there were already some talks and that Polish company PGNiG has already stored some gas in Ukraine, but some infrastructural issues have to be resolved, and that you have much more other options, as for example, Trans-Balkan gas pipeline that you mentioned. I understood that Ukraine could be also interested in either importing or some trade or storage of LNG from other regions of Europe. And I wanted to ask you also about prospects for cooperation in the longer run in hydrogen with Central European countries, or how Ukraine sees itself on European hydrogen map, because this is kind of a hot topic in Europe right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very interesting question. So, first one about the rumors. I don't have any information that official information says that there is some discussion. So, moreover, we hear from the administration, new US administration, there is no such discussions, and from our side, we do all what we can in order not to such discussion to actually to start or to be successful, because as we said, so from our side, this is like the question of very important question. From
So if I may jump in for just a moment, this is something to which Maria Shagina will be speaking directly. So
okay. So from our side, there is no. We are not participating. We don't have any official information, and we hope that nothing will happen. Regarding the LNG, yes, we. The main problem is, for example, in this Polish interconnection, is that there is some bottlenecks on the Polish gas transmission system, which does not allow to deliver the significant volume from the north of Poland to the south of Poland, where we are connected. But my understanding is by 2022, this should be resolved. From our side, we are ready to offtake. As soon as the gas will be delivered to our border, we are ready to offtake up to 6.6 billion cubic meters already. So it means that, for example, right now we can offtake all the gas which is coming to Sinoustia. So I understand Sinoustia is 4.5 billion cubic meters. But also we expect that the Baltic pipeline will start operating. So it will be some gas available in this region, which we are ready to deliver to Ukraine and further to other markets. I mean, to Ukraine, if it will be economically reasonable for the trade. And you're fully right that we also consider the option to deliver LNG from Turk. It's Croatia, the new terminal which just started this year. And now we are in discussion with Hungarian TSO in order to provide this firm capacity to deliver gas from Croatia through Hungary to Ukraine. So also this is for us, it's a very important point. And the last direction, south direction, is the Trans-Balkan pipeline, which gives us the possibility to get LNG gas from Greece, from Turkey. So technically, we already did some test deliveries, one of our shippers, but of course there are still some issues to be resolved, like the different and quite expensive tariff, for example, in Moldova or something like that. But I believe this is software. It could be with proper motivation from politicians, it could be done very, very quick. It's not soft, it's not hardware, which requires a lot of money to invest, time to build something. And about hydrogen, yes, of course, we are trying to find our place in this new market, but unfortunately, everybody, even in Europe, is still at the very beginning of this study. So we are part of the European Hydrogen Alliance. We are in constant discussion, cooperation with our peers, just to understand, what it will be, because we need also to synchronize our regulatory framework. How much hydrogen we can mix, because, for example, from our system, we need to pass gas to the Slovak system. So they will be able to offtake such gas with such requirements? How their system is ready for that? So I think this is quite long journey, but we are already started. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks to the two of you for that interesting and profound, detailed exchange. I now move to the respondents. We have Dr. Maria Shagina, who is a postdoctoral fellow at the Center for Eastern European Studies at the University of Zurich. She is currently affiliated with the Geneva International Sanctions Network at the Graduate Institute of International Development Studies in Geneva, which I know very well. She holds a PhD in political science from the University of Lucerne. She has held postdoctoral fellowships in Japan, in the UK. She is widely published and recognized as an international expert on sanctions and energy politics, with particular focus on the post-Soviet states. So please tell us, Maria, amongst other things, addressing the question of US-German consultations, what is the current situation, and what should we know about it and what it means?
Thank you, Robert. I'm glad to be joining you for the second webinar, and my task for today is to cover this elephant in the room that was mentioned by Mr. Makagon, is Nord Stream 2. And for the next 5 minutes, I'll try to cover the major sanctions development that happened since our last webinar in September 2020. And I'm happy to discuss, as was mentioned, the US-German negotiations, but also how to maximize the use of sanctions if they are chosen to be used by the Biden administration, but also what other instruments of economic statecraft can be complemented next to sanctions. So the biggest sanctions development that we've seen since September 2020 is, of course, the adaptation of PESCA, as standing for Protecting Europe's Energy Security Clarification Act, that was adopted on January 1st, 2021 as part of the NDA, National Defense Authorization Act. And it basically expands and tightens existing sanctions on Nord Stream 2 in the second line of Turk Stream. And we've seen the shifting of focus from just sanctioning pipeline vessels to pipeline activities. And the range of these pipeline activities is quite broad. So it includes insurance, reinsurance, and underwriting services. Also sanctioning any technological upgrades or installation of welding equipment, all other technical things I'm not gonna number here. But the next activity that is very damaging to Gazprom if the sanctions are implemented, it's testing, inspection, and certification. The sanctions are mandatory and with a retroactive effect, meaning they will be valid as of December 2019. Despite the fact that we've seen the expansion of sanctions, they do include 3 exemptions with a mitigating effect. And it means that governments and governmental entities from the European Union, Switzerland, UK, and Norway will be excluded. They will not be sanctioned. There is a possibility to also waive sanctions by using a national interest waiver if it serves the interest of the United States. And also the third mechanism is that sanctions will be only implemented in consultations with the same EU, Switzerland, UK, and Norway. So it's sort of mitigating mechanism, and something I'll discuss in a second more in detail. So PESCA is the third sanctions legislation act that we've seen. There are another two, but despite the numbering, the increasing number of these acts, what we've seen so far, it's sanctions threats. We haven't seen a lot of sanctions impositions itself. So the sanctions that were imposed by Trump administration on its last day is against the barge Fortuna and its owner, KVT Rus. And the same sanctions, the same entities were imposed under PESA sanctions by Biden administration, but those are the only two entities that have been sanctioned. No German or European entities been sanctioned. So the sanctions deterrence as the main tool so far as we've seen deterred quite a number of Western companies. And since July 2020, more than 20 withdrew from the projects. And just to name the few that are crucial for Gazprom to finish, if it's to be finished, is certification from Norway, certification company from Norway, DNVGL, also Swiss insurance, French insurance companies, and also Wintershall DEA, a consortium partner, stopped financing the project because of the expanded guidance on CATSA. So this deterrence is working, is effective as it is, but there are other tools that Biden administration can employ if it chose to use it. But what we've seen so far is the change in tone in contrast to the Trump administration, is that the emphasis is now to use extraterritorial sanctions as the last resort option. And the emphasis again is to revive transatlantic relationship. We can discuss how to do it in the most least damaging way for countries like Ukraine. So the conditions of this rumored US-Germany package deal have two issues. Is that Germany will provide assurances, and this can be interpreted in many ways, to lower Europe's energy dependence on Russian gas. And second is that Ukraine will be kept coupled on the European gas infrastructure. So as we've seen, the weak sanctions from the Biden administration that were imposed on February 19th is basically a way to buy more time to provide a platform to negotiate such a package deal. So the four options that were floated in German press in Handelsblatt include this now ill-famous from the Ukrainian side shutdown mechanism. What it means, there are also, so that if Gazprom cuts Ukraine from the transit, there is a automatic from the US side, but not automatic from the German side mechanism option. But there are also many technical, legal, political questions that needs to be solved. And it, as Mr. Makagon mentioned, raises the credibility of the option. The second scenario is the introduction of moratorium on the construction, something that's been supported now by many German politicians, is to stop the pipeline in order to solve the fundamental issues that have been dividing US and Europe since 90s, for that matter, and to discuss it, what it means for Europe to be dependent on Russian gas, and if there is some sort of number that will be satisfactory for the US and so on, but it needs a genuine discussion and also a credible linkage mechanism. If we're going to stop Nord Stream 2, shall it be linked to Donbass, Navalny, you name it. The third scenario is something that was also briefly discussed already, is to provide support, investments to Ukraine to smooth the transition to renewables, to hydrogen, and it's something that I think is very important. And Germany has been already a quite reliable partner to ensure the gas transit deal to 2024, and it's something we've seen that Germany also advocated or at least spoken to support Ukraine green infrastructure in the future. And the last option is just continuing as it is. If there are extraterritorial sanctions, then EU will be more motivated to go as it is without trying to circumvent sanctions as they are. So while Biden administration signaled that they are willing to compromise, the window of opportunities is getting narrower because there is more pressure from the US side, from Senate and House to pressure Biden administration, but there is also domestic pressure from Germany with the elections coming in September. So the main question remains how not to appear to be weak on Russia, but at the same time not to alienate countries like Ukraine, Poland, and the Baltic states while restoring the transatlantic relationship. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Maria. Your mention of the oncoming German elections is an ideal lead-in to the remarks by Andreas Umland, who is Research Fellow at the Swedish Institute of International Affairs in Stockholm, Associate Professor of Political Science at Kiev-Mohyla Academy, Senior Expert at the Ukrainian Institute for the Future in Kiev, Editor of book series, educated at Oxford, Berlin, a host of illustrious institutions, focuses for many years and is very well known and respected on contemporary Ukrainian and Central East European affairs. His articles have been written and published in 3 languages, English, German, and Russian. The list of places where they've been published is too long, but take my word for it, they're very impressive. And Andreas, so glad to, after years of back and forth on the social media, to welcome you in real-time voice. Please tell us about the domestic German context that Maria referred to.
Thanks a lot, Robert, and thanks for being in this excellent round. I've learned already a lot from the 3 presentations and look forward to learning more. I want to make 4 points about Germany, and I want to ask actually for 4 questions to the assembled experts. So I think why are we in this deadlock now? Apart from the losses and the liabilities, the penalties that a stopping of Nord Stream 2 would currently mean, I think there are 4 factors that explain the German position on this. I think 2 factors were Ukraine and the pro-Ukrainian side and the Polish side and the US cannot do much, but 2 factors I think on which Ukraine and the US and their friends can work on. I think the most fundamental here, apart from the losses that would currently be incurred, and I would be interested if somebody knows how much losses there would be for Western companies, for the German state perhaps. If somebody has any numbers, I would be interested to know that. I think the most fundamental question here maybe for Germany is that basically the US and Ukraine and Poland and so on, they are asking the German government or the EU to intrude in what, at least from the Western side, is a private business deal. It's certainly not a private business deal from the Russian side. It's a geopolitical operation from the Russian side, but the partners on the German and on the European side are private companies. And that is something that I find difficult sometimes to communicate here in Ukraine. I'm speaking from Kiev, that perhaps unlike in post-Soviet countries, it's not so easy for a government to get involved into these sort of foreign economic activities of private companies. and one cannot expect private companies to think in geopolitical terms or to be patriotic for Ukraine or to build united Europe or something. This is not what private companies are engaged in, and I think that would be too much to expect. So perhaps the only strategy here to get these private companies on board would be to actually propose them alternatives, perhaps with Ukraine, so that they can see other futures of getting into the energy business in Eastern Europe and not only with Russia. The second factor here is also an objective one, which is very difficult to deal with is German federalism. And there's simply one land in Germany, Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, which has quite strong regional interest in this project. That is where the Nord Stream 1 pipeline is currently already arriving, the gas is arriving, and the Nord Stream 2 pipeline would also deliver gas primarily to these are jobs, this is investment, this is infrastructure development, and also these regional politicians, and I'm afraid basically from every party, they are not interested in Ukrainian security or in European issues or geopolitics, or they have their own electorates, and they buy then often the Gazprom arguments, and they cooperate with Gazprom. And there's now even a foundation created with the help of the federal of the land of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern and with Gazprom that would supposedly circumvent these sanctions. That would be actually one of the questions that I would have: how much there is actually a chance for Germany, for these European actors to circumvent the US sanctions by these tricks like this foundation that has now been created, supposedly ecological green foundation in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. But there's very little, I'm afraid, that here the Friends of Ukraine can do about this, because these regional politicians, they will not become interested in geopolitics and Europe and Ukrainian security or anything like that. I think the two other issues where I think we could talk more, and which are, I think, the weakest one in the German discourse about Nord Stream 2 are pacifism and anti-Americanism. So there's here, first of all, I think a general misunderstanding, I believe, in Germany about the post-colonial or post-imperial situation in which Ukraine finds itself, which basically means that these countries like Ukraine, they are usually coming out of the empire is usually problematic. And if you look at the aftermath of the downfall of the Yugoslav multinational state and of the outer and inner Soviet empire, then this is actually a proof of this general rule of post-imperial, post-colonial situations, that wars are actually, unfortunately, something regular, something what is to be expected. So if you look at all the countries that came out of the Soviet Union and in Yugoslavia in Europe, then there's a very clear correlation, at least to me, clear correlation here between those countries that either got into the Western realm, they got early EU and NATO membership perspectives, they entered then the EU and NATO, which were safe. They basically resolved their security issue this way. Then there were the countries, Armenia and Belarus, that got under that basically got into an alliance with the old imperial power, and that were able to preserve peace thereby on their territory. And then there are the other countries, from Azerbaijan to Bosnia-Herzegovina, most of which are failed states. They suffered from war, and that is actually something that one would expect. And I think for the German mind, it was very difficult to understand that. So for the German mind, what is to be explained with regard to Ukraine in 2014 is, why was there war? 2014 in Ukraine? Why was there an annexation in 2014 in Ukraine? But if you look at it from a historical point of view and comparative point of view, the big question is actually, why was there no war in Ukraine until 2014 and no annexation of Crimea, as many had actually predicted in the 1990s there would be? And here I think something that Agatha has already referred to comes in, namely that until 2012, until October 2012, Russia and Ukraine were in a relationship of interdependence, in that Ukraine was dependent on Russian gas supplies and Russia was dependent to a very large extent dependent on the Ukrainian gas transportation system. And surprise, surprise, when the second string of Nord Stream 1 was opened in October 2012, after that, in 2013, the relations between Ukraine and Russia deteriorate, and finally, and they deteriorate, and that's very important to mention here, already before the Euromaidan. So there was, for instance, in August 2013, when we were still very far away from the Euromaidan, there was a 5-day full boycott of all Russian-Ukrainian trade for 5 days. In the summertime, few people noticed it. Actually, it was quite noticeable in Ukraine. It was a big topic. So we had already an escalation in 2013 in terms of trade wars. And I think that was a result actually of this escalation in the relationship was a result of Nord Stream 1 going online and thereby destroying the old interdependence. The odd thing here is that much of German foreign policy towards Eastern Europe already in the Soviet period is built on interdependence theory. It's built on the idea that you create, trade relationships, mutual investment, and so on, and that then creates peace. That is the idea. And in a way, for Germany, that has worked well. There was no war between the Soviet Union and Germany since the 1970s. But already in the 1970s, one should have noted, of course, is that this interdependence may create peace between West Germany and the Soviet Union, and perhaps it stabilized perhaps Europe then, but it did not prevent the invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. Yeah, so we have here actually a quite interesting repetition that in 1970 there was the so-called Röhrenkredit I, the pipeline credit 1, which was the largest German-Soviet financial deal in history, which created actually to a large extent the current gas transportation system in Ukraine. And 9 years later, after signing of this deal, Moscow invaded Afghanistan. In 2005, we have the Nord Stream 1 deal, and 9 years later, Moscow invades Ukraine. So interdependence theory works for German-Russian relations, but it doesn't work in general for creating peace. So it's actually a misunderstood pacifism that is, I think, Germany is following here, and that is something I think that can be and should be discussed with Germany, that the interdependence that Germany creates with Russia for itself and the peace that Germany thereby creates for itself destroys the Russian-Ukrainian interdependence, because there's no new gas flowing. The gas that is now flowing through Nord Stream 1 is the gas that would have otherwise flown through Ukraine. We have now war in Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea because this gas is not any longer flowing through Ukraine, but is now going through the Nord Stream 1 pipeline, and the Nord Stream 2 pipeline would just make things worse. And then the fourth, I think factor that I think is sometimes misunderstood or not sufficiently appreciated is anti-Americanism in all of that, and an interpretation that the whole confrontation between Germany and the US about Nord Stream 2 is about greedy Americans that are trying to use political means to sell their LNG to Germany, and that are just in a fight for markets, and that is what this is all about. And there's a widespread, I think I would even speculate that millions of Germans actually think that way. This is all about the Americans doing what they always do. They want to do business, and this is all about their LNG. Although this is, of course, as the experts assembled here, a faulty argument, because the US is currently, as far as I have seen in the statistics, actually not among the leading LNG exporters. And I saw a statistic, I think that was for 2019, of the 10 largest LNG exporters in the world, and the US was not among them, but Russia was among the 10 largest LNG exporters. So this is also something, I think, with which Russia is playing very skillfully, this sort of anti-Americanism, the portrait of the Americans who are just using here some supposed solidarity with Ukraine to push their own LNG into the European market. But maybe the energy experts here can comment on that, how plausible actually this argument is. As far as I can see, actually, there's very little grounds to believe that even if the deliveries from Russia would go down, which they will not, of course, even if Nord Stream 2 is not completed, the gas will simply come through Ukraine, as it currently does. But how plausible this argument is. And that leads me to the 4 questions that I have here, which is about also arguments that I often hear in Germany about the future of gas deliveries from Russia to the EU. And one of the big arguments in the German discourse, and maybe Serhii can here comment on this, is that allegedly the Ukrainian gas transportation system is at some point going to be out of work. And I've even heard arguments here that allegedly Germany has experts, East German experts, who were actually in Ukraine, in Soviet Ukraine in the 1970s, building the Ukrainian gas transportation system, and allegedly they know that the Ukrainian gas transportation system is basically soon to go out of business. Then I would like to hear, maybe as there are colleagues here in North America, what you would think, how much actually the Biden administration has here freedom of action in terms of postponing sanctions or not imposing sanctions. Because my understanding is that this is now legislation. It's supported by both Republicans and Democrats, and actually the White House has actually a small corridor only within which it can adjust its policies. Then there is an argument here that allegedly the gas transportation through the sea is much it's quicker because and that would then lead to a quick amortization of Nord Stream 2. That is an argument that I've heard in Germany, that because of the water pressure in the Baltic Sea, you can run much more gas through in an underwater pipeline than a land pipeline, and that's supposedly one argument in favor of these underwater pipelines, because allegedly you can actually transport with them much quicker gas. And then the final question that I have here, and then maybe that's also a question to Serhii primarily, is if the Russian export of its gas through Ukraine to the European Union would stop, what would that mean for the domestic Ukrainian gas deliveries within Ukraine? So Ukraine would still have to transport inside Ukraine its gas to domestic customers. And I've heard here some energy experts saying that this is actually perhaps maybe the most problematic part of Russia cutting its exports through Ukraine, because then the pressure that the export gas is creating in the gas transportation system would be lost. And the loss of pressure in the entire gas transportation system would then actually create problems for Ukraine to serve, its different cities in Ukraine, and that actually Ukraine would then have problems in domestic gas deliveries. These are the 4 questions that I wanted to have answers to, if you have them. Thanks.
Thank you, Andres. I can perhaps begin to provide an answer before I give the floor back to the other participants. I can confirm, and said he will have the opportunity to speak at a little greater length, is that the pressure in the Ukrainian gas transmission system does become problematic. There was an occasion in the last year or two where Russia, I believe, without adequate warning, cut the pressure. Problem is that if the pressure is not maintained, then the pipelines will turn into scrap metal. That's the problem. It will not be very problematic to get them up and running again for technical reasons, as I understand it. Sergei may correct me if I'm wrong, but that is my non-technical understanding. Likewise, as regards water pressure, the argument in this respect is not intuitively obvious to me, since the pipelines are thick, dense metal. The depth at which they are laid in the Baltic Sea is not extremely deep, that there is no prima facie reason to suppose, I can find no prima facie reason to suppose that the water on top of the pipelines creates sufficient additional pressure on the gas in the pipeline so as to promote quicker transmission or greater velocity of transmission. I may be corrected on that, but that is my impression. Now, I will ask first, Maria, will go in reverse order, to address your question, Andreas, about the Biden administration, freedom of action. She is more of an expert on this, I think, than I am. Although everything that you said is factually correct, Andreas, she will have a greater grasp of the current situational nuances. So I will give that to Maria, and then we will go to Sergei for your first question and anything else that he feels it necessary to say. Then we'll give Agata a chance to respond to anything she wishes, and then we will go to the Q&A from the audience. So, Maria, please, what freedom of action does the Biden administration have? You did enumerate in detail the 3 provisions under which the administration may opt not to impose sanctions, but Andreas's question, I believe, regards the political realities. How likely is it that any of these will be possible inside the Beltway?
Yeah, no, thank you, Andreas, for 2 questions. As I understand, the other one also refers to Stiftung that was created by the Mecklenburg-Vorpommern government. So to answer the first one on the government, the Biden government's leeway, as we know, so the 2 packages of sanctions, PESCA and PESA, are mandatory, right? They are bipartisan, mandatory, they need to be imposed. CAATSA sanctions, third package, is discretionary. So CAATSA is only for investments and something that was widened, the guidance was expanded recently. But the most damaging packages is PESCA and PESA.
I'm very sorry, Maria, I'm very sorry to interrupt you, but I understand from Sergei that he will have to leave us in 10 minutes. So I would like to give him, I'm very sorry, Really, I am. To give him, I know you'll understand, though it's impolite of me, but it's necessary to give him the opportunity first to respond to anything he wishes, and then we will come back to your answer.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. Like I plan to leave in 7:30 because I have another presentation. Sorry for that.
Yes, it's the evening where you are. You probably have not even had supper. Please go ahead.
No, it's okay. So actually, thank you very much. It's very, very interesting discussion, and for me, it was very interesting to hear what Andreas said about these ideas, perceptions, and I believe this is partly this is the result of the propaganda of Gazprom, in Germany. I believe this what they talk. This is not true. So regarding the pressure and stuff like that, yes, we had a problem. Not problem. We have a discussion with Gazprom about pressure in 2019. So according to the contract, they have to provide us with certain pressure. Of course, we can offtake gas with a lower pressure, but it means that we will have to run our own compressor station just to flow it, and we just don't want to spend own money. So if they promise us, and this is part of our agreement, to provide a 65 bar at the border station, they have to provide 65 bar. They provided 60. So it means that we have to spend our own money just to run our compressor station additionally to flow this gas. And this was not the technical problem for us. It was just a commercial problem, because we said, guys, we don't want to spend our money. Spend your money and just give us the pressure. So, so this is not somehow related that our system will not work without it. Other topic that without the Russian transit, we will not survive. We already proved several times that we can live without Russian transit. Our system is fully ready to work in the reverse mode. It's easily for us to bring the system and deliver gas from west to east. First time we proved it back in 2009 when the Russians cut the flow. The second time we proved it in 2019 when actually they also kind of stopped not so significantly decreased the transit. So we had to again start bringing gas from the storages from west to east. So for us, it's not a problem at all to work with without Russian transit. Not a problem at all. And also we will continue. We have huge Ukrainian own production. It's about 20 billion cubic meters. We're one of the biggest producer in Europe. We need just to import about 10 billion because our total market in Ukraine, total consumption is 30 billion. So this is a huge amount. We have very developed chemical production and other businesses, population, district heating. So we will have to deliver this gas to the population, and we will do it. But to deliver gas just for 30 BCM, we don't need 53 compressor stations, which we currently have. So it means that we will have 10 compressor stations. We will be able to satisfy our needs, but unfortunately, we will not be able to transit a significant amount of gas. We are not talking about, for example, digging out the pipelines or something like that. So idea is that we will not continue maintaining these 53 compressor stations. We will just liquidate them, and this is it. Some pipelines, it's not significant, about 15% we will liquidate because they are redundant. For example, we have 3 major pipelines, and for local distribution, we need all of them 3. So we will just use 1 or 2 for redundancy. So, but for Ukraine, it's not a problem at all. So we will survive without the transit. The problem will be for Europe, because in case of the peak demand in Europe, they will need our flexibility, which we currently provide. We can easily deliver from 0 to 200 million cubic meters per day. We can easily do it in half a day. This was the business case built back in Soviet time when Soviet Union kept the gas in Ukrainian storages, and if it was peak demand in Europe, immediately this gas was delivered to to Europe. For example, from our storages to Slovakia, only 70 kilometers. It means like in 15 minutes, the gas can start flowing from our storages to Slovakia. And the possibility of our storages is to withdraw up to 250 million cubic meters per day. So
Sergey, before you go, I know you're on your way out, and please excuse me for interrupting, but I do have one question for you myself, which is that you made a reference earlier to our transiting gas from Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan through Russia to Europe. That's geopolitically probably very unlikely. And as you know, Russia actually signed the Energy Charter Treaty in 1995, but it was referred to the Industrial Committee in the Duma in 1996, which happened to be chaired by a member of the Communist Party of the Russian Federation, and the process of ratification died there and has not been reanimated. So that if it is the case that gas from Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan will not transit Russia in order to get into the Ukrainian gas transmission system, have you any foresight, have you any thoughts about this long storied Trans-Caspian pipeline, which in its current incarnation will take 16 BCMY, billion cubic meters a year, in the second string across under the White Stream to the Black Sea to Constanza, and then by reverse flow to the Trans-Balkan pipeline would go therefore into the Ukraine system, and then from there back into Central and Eastern Europe. When you said that, I saw you were quoted a few weeks ago in the press to say that you had a target on Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan gas. This is actually what I thought you meant, but perhaps you are skeptical, of which you have every right to be, because it's been discussed already for 20 years and nothing has happened. So are you thinking also about the Trans-Caspian pipeline White Stream system or not?
Of course, we are interested. Unfortunately, this problem should be solved by Europe, not by us. We are, from our side, we are ready to work in different conditions. For example, for us, it's not a problem to offtake the gas from the Soyuz pipeline, which goes directly from Kazakhstan through Russia to Ukraine. It was the first pipeline which was built back in the 70s to deliver gas from Soviet Union, from the Kazakhstan to export pipelines. This pipeline is still in use. We can easily deliver 15 billion cubic meters to Ukraine and then further to Europe. So this is just the goodwill of Russian Federation. And you correctly said that we shouldn't expect such a goodwill. Trans-Caspian pipeline is a very important project, and I'm very glad that recently there are some developments. And I'm quite skeptical about this White Stream project. Maybe it will be more related to TANAP. So because you know that TANAP capacity could be increased almost 2 times by building new compressor stations, and I think it will be enough capacity for both for the Azerbaijan gas and from this gas for the Central Asia. So I believe, but again, I think that Europe should be kind of more insisting on this and investing in this, because without such approach, it will not happen, because the companies, they will not invest without seeing the political support and protection, yes, political protection for this project.
Thank you. The last thing as you have to go, I can share with you my information is that the Turkmen government, if they had wanted to build the short pipeline, between the gas platforms, they could have done that any time in the last 15 years, and that they have been holding out for the full 32 BCM, which means the 2 strings, not just the 1 string that would go through TANAP. But they want, if they're going to displease the Russians, they want to displease them in a big way, not in a small way, you see. So that's okay. Just my current information for you. And I want to thank.
I would like just to answer two more questions, because I also wrote it down. So then regarding this, how much gas, comparison of undersea pipeline and on land pipeline. So we call these undersea pipelines like the golden pipelines, because usually the compressor stations are built every 100 kilometers. It's just to make this pressure is very equal. I mean, not significant pressure low. But since the Russians, they were not able to build actually they were prohibited to build the compressor station during the Nord Stream 2. So it means that they have to have compression 200 bars at the entry to Nord Stream, and very, very thick pipeline. So it's like 5 times thicker than pipelines that we use. So this is the real golden project, you know, because it's like there is no sense to invest huge amount of money to build such a project, especially.
And it's no coincidence that half of the pipelines are fabricated and constructed by a German firm, and the other half are constructed and fabricated by a Russian firm. This is also no coincidence.
Yeah. So that's why what I've heard from our colleagues, so they're even afraid to go to this compressor station because power is so huge it can destroy just the half of the city. So, but this is the politics, and I would like just a couple of numbers for you to understand. So, in order to keep our system running, so please do not trust that our system will stop in 2 years. No way. It's we invest every year about $200 million in the regular maintenance and repair works. We plan to invest $1.5 billion in modernization, $1.5 billion in modernization during 10 years. So it means that, I mean, but Gazprom spent 20 or 30 or 50 billion dollars to build Nord Stream 2. So it means that from our case, our system is much cheaper than Nord Stream 2. So there is no economical sense to build. And actually, the last point I would like to say that the Russia decided to start the Nord Stream 2 without having any permission from the European Union. And now they kind of try to say that, guys, we already built, give us the permission. But this is not the way it should be done. So they knew that there is no permission, there is no consensus in Europe, there is no union, but they started to build. And this is the usual approach of our northern neighbor. So this is the, how do you call it, the segregate and conquer. Yeah, so they just pushing. And this is the significant threat to European Union. And I believe that no financial interest of Germany company can overvalue the value of European unity, and this is the way how Europe can sustain this pressure. From our side, I mean, for us, it's obviously this is the not economically reasonable, economically driven project. Moreover, the majority of gas which flowing through Ukraine is gas not for Germany. This gas is for Italy, mainly for Italy, but also for Austria and a little bit for Hungary. So our gas, it's not for Germany. So in this new reality, if Nord Stream 2 will be built, so the Italy will get gas through Germany. So that's why Germany is just becoming the transit, additional transit part in this exercise. And also it means that the gas in Italy will be more expensive than in Germany. And also it will give some kind of benefits to the German economy. So this is, I believe that there is a lot of signals of such approach when the Gazprom trying to segregate the European countries and create this constant discussion tensions between EU members. So thank you very much. Unfortunately, I have to run up. And it was a great pleasure to talk to you, and thank you very much.
Well, we thank you, Sergei, and I thank you also for motivating this session and for your very much appreciated participation. And so we wish you a good evening wherever you are going next. We return with my regrets once more stated to Maria Shakina, to review and continue her reply to Andreas Umland's question concerning the the political freedom of action or margin of maneuver that the Biden administration may or may not have as regards the imposition of sanctions. Maria, please continue.
Yes, so as I said, while some sanctions are mandatory, we need to understand that sanctions are a political tool, and we've seen from the Trump administration how sanctions were delayed or not imposed at all. So there is a leeway to what you can sort of postpone it. So my understanding, having heard the press secretary Ned Price yesterday, he said that the next sanctions, so far, as I said in my presentation, the emphasis is on consultation. The extraterritorial sanctions is the last option that will be considered. And the next sanctions that they might be imposed, it will be linked with the next report, PESA report, which is due in May. So this is something, the small window of opportunities up till May, where Germany and the US would have time to talk and to table the deal. But also Biden administration is revamping its whole sanctions program and also matching sanctions with its goals, whether they are achieving it. And this is something I think we need to remember, that just by slapping sanctions on a pipeline, we will not solve the fundamental disagreements, as I said, that have been since the 90s. And sanctions might help to get rid of this one pipeline, but I believe Russia will not stop at this pipeline. And we've seen Turk Stream, and something that Russia been trying to do since early 2000. So sanctions will be a quick fix too, but that will no way solve the disagreements, the divisions that are there. And there are other economic tools, geoeconomic tools that might be much more helpful. We've seen the foresees initiative that will help to mitigate if the Nord Stream 2 is built, to mitigate the impact of the negative impact on Eastern Europe as well, but also the robust screening investments. This is something that will be much more effective, and again will be much broader than just Nord Stream 2, something to take into account, maybe next to sanctions, if sanctions are imposed. The second question is about the potential of the so-called Climate Protection Fund to bypass sanctions. And here the short answer is very unlikely, simply, so they're trying to exploit this exemption. The first exemption that I mentioned is that governmental entities from EU are excluded. But in the press, it was said that to buy particular materials or goods, they will found a business entity, which already contradicts the legislation that says business entities will not be excluded. Now, also the other legislation stipulated facilitated transactions will also not be tolerated. So again, this will be up to the political will of the Biden team to slap sanctions. But the short answer is no. If it's possible to use it, to only very limited usage as to purchase material, but it will not solve the problem of insurance certifications, which are the main roadblocks that are on the way for Nord Stream 2 to be completed. And the third one, something that Andreas mentioned, sort of caught my attention, is this discussion about the true motives of the US to impose sanctions, whether it's linked to selling LNG, or we now see the selling oil is something that's also been floated in media. And I think it's a very important aspect. Again, drawing parallels to previous cases from the 90s, from the Siberian pipeline crisis, it's important to understand that this credibility of sanctions and also the willingness of sender states to bear the costs for sanctions that they want to impose on allies is very important. If US is not willing to, let's say, cut the imports of oil, and now they've been risen quite a lot from Russia, it undermines the point, of the EU should bear the cost, but we are not willing to bear the cost. And this is basically, if we look at the case that was in the 90s, the unwillingness of the US to impose sanctions to cut its own agricultural exports to Soviet Union basically triggered the failure of sanctions as it is, because Europeans sort of gathered in resistance and did not comply with US sanctions. And this is something I think that sort of spirals this anti-Americanism that you also mentioned, that extraterritorial sanctions contradicts the European, the so-called now open strategic autonomy that they try to build. So in my way, extraterritorial sanctions is indeed the last option, and there are other options that can be used here.
Thank you, Maria. Agata will have a chance to reply to any comments and answer questions from Andreas and Maria. Then she will have to leave in 5 or 10 minutes. And then we do have questions from the audience whom we have not forgotten, and we will get to those. In fact, it falls together very well. We have so far questions for Maria, questions for Andreas, none for Agata, and none for Serhii. So we will keep going. It's already at the 1 hour 44 minute mark, which is past our usual time, but we will keep going until Robert Baines puts an end to it. So Agata, please intervene, and then we will thank you for being here.
Thank you, Robert. So I wanted to ask some more questions or comment by Maria related to Biden administration and how much room for maneuver it has when it comes to sanctions on Nord Stream. I wonder if there is an option that Congress presses that much or intervenes in other way, that the administration is forced to act quicker than in 90 days period that you mentioned. Why I ask that is because I hear there is congressional criticism of Biden administration way of dealing with Nord Stream 2. I heard that there was some kind of similar intervention by Congress some time ago when related to Iranian sanctions. So perhaps there is some parallel with that. But I ask also because there is the work on pipelaying of Nord Stream 2 is speeding, and we hear that Nord Stream 2 construction could be finished until May or even quicker, because there is another ship than Fortuna sailing and perhaps joining in. So there is certain time limit for the administration or for US if it wants to act actually. Then I agree that sanctions would not resolve fundamental problems. And then I wonder what are these other tools, because they would have to be very complex and involve so many actors and so many different issues that I really start to wonder how to construct it to be effective actually, and to not leave some parties that much unsatisfied that this solution would be not sustainable. Then some comments on Andreas saying that one of German problems with Nord Stream 2 is that it was an investment by private companies. But actually we should remember that private European investors were forced to withdraw from Nord Stream 2 AG company. And so the only investor in the company that builds and owns Nord Stream 2 is Gazprom. So that is fully Russian enterprise. Indeed, German companies are co-financing Nord Stream 2 construction, but then they are not really co-owners of that. And I understand that they should get back their money in some way. I understand that the problem may be with some way Nord Stream 2 AG is seeking for compensation if the project is stopped. But then indeed project started when it didn't get all permits required from Danish authorities, etc. And last comment would be on Trans-Caspian and White Stream, because I always am fond of Caspian region, which I also researched some time ago. I have a feeling that it is a bad timing in Europe for new infrastructural projects and new sources, as European Union is backing off from co-financing new gas pipelines. So I don't really see Europe engaging itself in politically in promoting that project right now very much. And I agree with Sergei that Turkey may be more interested. I also don't think that there is good time in Europe and in Romania for White Stream. Romania is focused on its own offshore gas projects development, which also have some problems. And then there is this big uncertainty about gas demand in Europe in longer term, which kind of makes the outlook uncertain. So thank you. Thank you.
Yes, Agatha, I just reply that to my knowledge, the idea behind the Trans-Caspian and White Stream has shifted lately to include the possibility of transiting either a mix or also blue hydrogen, and using Romanian depleted mines and resources for carbon storage. And that this is a response, I believe that it's an attempt to conform to the European desiderata. And that eventually, I know that Azerbaijan also is interested in producing blue hydrogen for export, and likewise as carbon storage, so that they're acknowledging that there are political reticence to the creation of new such infrastructure. It's just very interesting to watch. This has just happened in the last week or month or so. So I just share that with you as a new development, that it's they don't want to. They think it's not dead yet. Put it that way, and it may even become PCIs in the next round. It's not, believe it or not, it's not entirely excluded in my information. It's not a sure thing, but it's not excluded.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So have a good evening. Agatha, thank you for being here. Good to meet you finally and say hello. We will pass now to questions from the audience, and we have questions for Maria and Andreas. I will put them together. To Andreas, the question is from, excuse me, I have to page up here, from Wojciech Jakovic. What is the economic advantage of Nord Stream 2 over the present route through Ukraine from the German perspective? And the question for Maria is, a major setback to Pesca is Danish Agentur simply does not care about exit of NPVGL. Who is now Gazprom's qualified certifier during the work, or do we not know? Those are the questions. Andreas, please go first, and then Maria.
Well, maybe Maria will actually have a better question. She's more of an energy expert than me. I'm more sort of dealing here with the political side. But as far as I know, or as my feeling is, that the opinion now in Germany is basically, well, we've almost built it fully, and so much money has been put into this, and it would be odd to stop it at such a late point. And it's maybe this sort of German thinking in terms of effectiveness, to simply forget about all this all these pipes that have been already put on the bed sea of the Baltic Sea, and to continue with the old pipeline is wrong. And then there's also a reputation problem here that I tried to raise with Sergei, that there is a discourse in Germany. I'm not sure whom is it fed by, that the Ukrainians are unreliable, that the transportation system is old, that this will go out of business anyway at some point, and there's this sort of German fear or even angst that we will be left without energy, because at some point we need the Russians, so to say. And it's very difficult to argue against that. And I've been actually to a discussion where there was a high-ranking German diplomat saying, we have here East German workers who were building the Ukrainian gas transportation system in the 1970s. And they tell us that this pipeline is going out of business. Actually, he told me that a few years ago, so it should have already gone out of business, by this sort of calculation. And so, and then, there's the feeling that, we want to have this gas deliveries, and we need that for the so-called Energiewende, because we need something for the transition period when we get out of coal and out of nuclear power, and before we get fully into renewable energies. We need, for the transition period, we allegedly need a lot of gas, and it has to be this Russian gas, and it has to be Russian gas through the Baltic Sea, and that's the only way this is secure. Germany will be safe with that. I think that's a bogus argument, but that is what I hear again and again. I mean, for me, the question also here that maybe I would also pose the more principal question: is there still, is this project actually still under discussion? Because there are people like Mikhail Krutikhin in Russia who says that Nord Stream 2 is dead. We have these sanctions. The US has made a move, and that's it. And there's no way, you can get around that. That was actually what I was hinting with my question. How much corridor does actually leeway has the White House here anymore? I would just add to that judging from the past behavior of the Congress, if Germany now comes up, like with this foundation and so on, or if there's some sort of new schemes to actually get Nord Stream running, the Congress will come up just with a new law, and we'll just, because the mood in Washington seems to be, and I was actually, just want to quote here John Herbst, who was saying to me and to others 2 years ago that, in Washington, they want this project to be dead, and they will do whatever it takes to finish it. And it's bipartisan. It's one of the few issues where the Democrats and Republicans agree, and it's the overwhelming majority in Congress that is behind that. So, in a way, maybe this whole discussion about Nord Stream 2 is just, there's an argument to be made here that it's over, because the US is too large, and, they will always find ways to kill it, even if Germany and the EU will do something, because the mood is just such in Germany, and perhaps even against the will of the White House. Against, I could even imagine some sort of tension here between the Congress and the White House, in which the Congress may be more hawkish than the White House, but may then get its way.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if Robert Baines has to make an exit now or not, but I give Maria a chance to reply to Andres and also to answer the question about the certifier for the pipeline.
Yes, just to also weigh in on the first question about the economical side. And I think, Andres is maybe better qualified in terms of, because it's a lot of political side to this project. It's a lot of this legacy of this mutual interdependence and so on. But from economical side, it's important to understand that Russia does provide one of the cheapest gas sources. So currently it's at about $2 per MMBTU, whereas the imported LNG is $4. So for Germany, it is an attractive option. There've been very attractive contracts signed. One can question, the ethical part of it, but that's something that I mentioned. This is the question of robust investment screening, it's not sanctions. So while we can call it as a dead project, I think we're running into danger of a lot of sort of wishful thinking, but there are options. I'm not rooting for the Nord Stream 2, but also it's important to understand that the sort of desire to impose extraterritorial sanctions at any cost, they will backfire at splitting US and EU, which will not be good for Ukraine in the long term. We need two countries, two allies together. That's why there are other geoeconomic instruments that can alleviate it. So while Biden administration does think it's a bad deal again, but they are still buying time to solve it in an amicable way, whether they will solve it or not. But for me, it's something to, there is a room to analyze what's possible, what's not, from an analytical point of view, not from a political, as I'm not supporting Nord Stream 2 per se. And on the second question, about the certifier, well, as I said, this is the weakest point for Gazprom. So this is the strongest sanctions measure that is currently in place. And this is something that they will have to deal if, there are no sanctions up to that point. If the construction is completed, the next question and the big question, who will be the certifier? If we look at the Danish permit, it's rather vague, but it's more specific than, let's say, a requirement for an insurer. Insurer just says anyone, basically. But the requirement for a certifier, it says any third party, but it needs to comply with already set standards that were set by the Norwegian DNV. That means if a Russian company takes on this task, can it, uphold these requirements for sort of Norwegian requirements for a pipeline to be for the next 50 years? It's in the current Danish permit. I'm not a technical expert to answer that, but that would mean that even if something is possible with cooperation with Denmark and so on, that would probably mean an updated Danish permit in the future, meaning more delays for Nord Stream 2, unless we see sanctions.
Okay, thank you, Maria. We just hit the 2-hour mark. So I think Robert Baines has something to say.
Thanks so much, Robert. It's a very simple wrap up and a sincere thank you both to Maria and Andreas, and of course to Dr. Cutler and our other panelists who have now left. But this conversation is extremely important for Canada. It may not seem it on the outset, but the security of all of Europe has knock-on effects, of course, for the rest of the global community. And I can't thank you enough for helping us to dig around, to try to confirm what's going on and what are the likely impacts. So thank you so much. And we really hope to continue this conversation and this relationship in the future. For all those who are watching, we will be sending an email around so that you may join us in our next energy security panel, which Dr. Cutler will be continuing to curate in his ablest way, as he has been able to do for the past 8 months now, I guess it's been, Dr. Cutler. And I would like to offer special thanks to Griffin Cotton Cornwall, who is our energy security editor under Dr. Cutler. Thanks so much, Griffin, for helping to make this happen. And I hope to all those who are attending that you'll join us again. Thanks so much.